Hey guys, welcome back. We are doing Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 1, and I am so sorry that it did not upload yesterday, so I'm refilming the intro and outro and uploading it today, along with Echo, so you're going to see way more videos coming out. Super excited on that, and I have a lot of content planned, but so Echo will be coming out later. Anyway, I also want to apologize while I try to keep the Easter eggs within each episode organized. I know there's a few episodes, I think starting like episode 15, where it kind of gets jumbled. Just a heads up, I apologize, but let's just get right into it. So we're starting with episode 1, which is the pilot, and it really just opens up about how S.H.I.E.L.D. is an organization that's like hidden from behind the scenes, covering heroes. This is Iron Man, by the way. We have the Battle of New York. There's lots of references and Easter eggs. Thor. Battle of New York, the Chitauri. And starting with the first episode, we see Ace, who is the little boy, looking at the action figures of the first Avengers, the ones that are seen in the Battle of New York, aka the first Avengers movie. Then we have Ace's dad, Michael Peterson, saving a woman. He doesn't want to be seen because there are situations that come about throughout this episode as well as others. Anyway, due to this incident, we are then introduced to Agent Ward and what is seen as a terrorist organization called the Rising Tide. And this is when the team that we will be following throughout the next 7 seasons is when we're introduced to the majority of the team. So we first start with Ward being extracted, and now we see him in Maria Hill's office. So Maria Hill asks what S.H.I.E.L.D. stands for, and this is Ward's answer, and he's talking about his last mission where he got the oh my god, I cannot speak, Chitauri link, because that is what they do. They receive alien things and people that have powers, right? And we're going to see that throughout, again, the next 7 seasons. So just to backtrack, Agent Hill's office, we don't officially know where she's located, but we have the idea that's probably somewhere in Washington, D.C. somewhere, or Maryland, close by, because there's a lot of bureaucratic red tape that they tend to go through, as you guys know, throughout Marvel. So during this interview between Grant Ward and Maria Hill, they're talking about the Battle of New York, and there's a mention of Hulk, Iron Man, Thor, as the main Avengers, but also of Agent Coulson. Now, Agent Coulson has made an appearance throughout the films as a very minor role from S.H.I.E.L.D., along with Director Fury. But he does play a huge part, especially with this series, right? He is the leader of the team. So this Easter egg or reference is obviously to the Avengers and Fury, and especially to Coulson, who had been hurt during the Battle of New York in the Avengers. He had been stabbed through the heart with a Chitauri spear, and he was saved through the Project of Tahiti. Now this does come into play a lot later throughout the season. Here is a reference to Romanoff, aka Black Widow, and then we have a reference to Project Pegasus, which again will come back throughout the seasons, but I also want to make a reference that Pegasus was Hercules' horse, flying horse. So that's a reference to the movie Hercules. And another reference to Tony Stark and his tower. Now, with superheroes, we have origin stories, and basically, this episode was the origin story of Deathlock, also known as Michael Peterson. He does make a play later on, and then we have Lola, Phil Coulson's beloved car. So now we are in episode 2084. So we start off with this little hula dancer, which we see come into play later on. This is an Easter egg to Lilo and Stitch, along with to the Tahiti Project. So Daisy is officially part of the group, although she's not technically a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent yet, but this is when Phil Coulson was telling her about Director Fury and the Battle of New York and how he was affected and what an 084 is. Again, 084 will come into play later on, but he was saying the last 084 that was found was Thor's hammer, which we saw at the end of... I can't remember which one it was. It wasn't a... hold on. At the end of... post-credits of Iron Man 2, where we see Phil Coulson pulling up and seeing it in the middle of the desert, which then goes into we discover Thor. Anyway, the team is called into Peru, and so they find the 084 within this temple. They're trying to figure out how it got there because the temple dates back to a certain time, but the technology dates back to World War II and the Tesseract. Then I kind of glanced over it when they were talking about the Calvary. The Calvary is a reference to Melinda May, who is one of their teammates, who, by the way, she is played by... I am so sorry, guys. She in herself is a Easter egg. She is played by Ming-Na Wen. She is the only actress thus far in 2024 that has played a Disney princess. She voiced Mulan. She was in Star Wars. She is... hold on, I will tell you who she plays. My goodness, why is this? She plays Fennec Sand, and then she also plays Melinda May in Marvel. So she's been in all three franchises, which I think is pretty awesome. Anyway, so they're talking about the Calvary, which again, this something that comes up throughout the season. We have a reference to the Matterhorn, which is not only in Switzerland. It was, I think, a book. But it is also a ride in Disney. Yeah, it's a book by Carl Marlantes. But it is also a ride in California at Disneyland. So, few different meanings, but definitely some links, Easter egg wise. Very smart. Then we have the slingshot. So supposedly with an 084, if it's not a human being, they supposedly, and I say supposedly because again this comes back up in the future, will slingshot it into space, close to the sun, destroying it. And then we have Daisy Johnson, who was part of the Rising Tide, basically saying to whoever this is that she is officially in as part of the team. So she's kind of undercover as a Rising Tide um, member, and it gets complicated. Now we are in episode 3, The Asset, and we are starting off with a team of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents who are transporting, we don't know what it is. They get hijacked by some dark matter material. And I just want to say this agent's name is Mac, Mac being a reference to the truck in Cars. So, yeah. But he's also a trucker, so kind of funny. So, Daisy makes a reference to 24-hour fitness gym, and then their shield number for the bus, the plane 8, is 616, which is eerily some familiar to 626, aka Stitch. Just saying. Just saying. What are your thoughts on that? So the team gets called out to Colorado because Dr. Franklin Hall was kidnapped by whoever, and they use this dark matter. And they discover that he was taken to Malta by Ian Quinn, and ended up working for Ian Quinn. They were friends in college, but during the whole fight scene, Dr. Hall got sucked up by the dark matter, and at the very end we see that he's like trying to escape it, but S.H.I.E.L.D. does not know that. So now we are on episode 4, I Spy, and this is going to come in again throughout the season. So we have this woman, Alda Amador, who was a former S.H.I.E.L.D. agent that Phil Coulson trained, and he wants to help her. So throughout this, they find out that she's doing all of these things, but she's being controlled, which is why they really want to, well, not they, but Phil Coulson wants to give her a chance, because this is not like her. So when I originally watched Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and wasn't doing the Easter eggs, I really thought this helmet looked a lot like Star Wars, but then it made me think back to, this was an Avengers helmet, aka Captain Marvel, when she was a pilot, but it still really reminds me of Star Wars. Anyway, they end up helping Amor, and Agent Ward takes over using glasses that are like tuned in thanks to the spiffiness of Fitzsimmons and Daisy's. And in this scene, the people wanted to see this map of some sort. They're not even sure what it is truly, but this does come back and play throughout all the seasons. It is going to play an intricate role. Episode 5, The Girl in the Flower Dress. So this is Reina, and she comes into play a lot. She found this guy, and she's giving him the nickname Scorch because he can use fire on his hands. And she does reference Steve Rogers, aka Captain America. By the way, they are currently in China, or this takes place mainly in China. I'm sorry, I just realized that these are not fully in order. There's a reference to Houdini, and the team is in Austin because they realize that the leak to this guy who plays Scorch came from Texas, who ends up being Daisy's ex-boyfriend, and yeah. So now the team is officially in China to help. And this is when Miles, Daisy's ex-boyfriend, is talking about all the great people who hacked the system and kind of let things be known. He was talking about Edward Snowden, Aaron Swartz, and a few other people. Just to make note, some of these people really are real. If you know, you know. Here's a reference to Minecraft, which, by the way, I love to play. There are some Marvel themed mods out there, by the way. So Miles thought that he was getting paid by some ecological thing, and they were doing experiments on centipedes. The Centipede Project came into play in the first episode with Michael Peterson, and it'll come back throughout the seasons, especially throughout season 1. But this is when they're like, oh no, this is what we're dealing with and we need help. And then in the last portion, we hear the name Clairvoyant for the first time. Episode 6, Fist. So here they are in Wrigley, Pennsylvania, and we have a weird incident where this man is being affected by something. And it turns out it's going to be from a Chitauri helmet. Here we have Daisy referencing the Big Lebowski, right? I think that's what it said. It was a movie. So 2 of the victims were survivors, or responding firefighters and survivors of the New York incident, which was Avengers. So that is what that is referencing, and as you can see, they took something that they shouldn't have, and that was the helmet, which caused them to have these issues when it was touched, when they touched some of the blood of the Chitauri. Phil Coulson mentions Iron Man, which we know that he knows from the Iron Man movies, and then there's a mention of James Bond, so we know that they are still in the same universe and timeline. Episode 7, The Hub. Now this is where a lot of the action happens, and the red hand, set them up. So they sent in 2 of the Coulson's team to basically be killed. And that's not good. So she is the Red Hand, and she's mentioning that Hawkeye and Black Widow never had backup, that they never had an extraction plan, and they were always able to get out of it. The issue is that they had, like, superpowers, right? Technically. Well, Hawkeye kind of had them. No, actually, neither one of them technically had superpowers, but they were well trained, right? They were trained for these situations. Even though they were both agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., they were trained differently than typical agents, right? They are Avengers, whereas these guys are not. And so they have to figure out how to get them extracted. Now this is when Coulson realizes that they set them up for failure. That they're going to leave their team behind. And this plays a huge role in his character development. Here's a quick picture of the hub. But the team, especially Daisy, goes behind their back and they end up doing good things. And Coulson agrees at some point. He's upset, but he agrees. And so they extract their team members. Episode 8, The Well. So here we have mentions of other worlds. Thor, Odin, Loki, Asgard, and there is other members from Asgard, one of which they will find out, they will meet. But during Avengers I think it was Age of Ultron. Guys, so sorry, I paused. I'm back. This attack happened during Thor Dark World, when Greenwich University was attacked by aliens, and now SHIELD is cleaning it up because they don't want anyone to just get alien material. And we'll see, this is a problem of when civilians get it, it becomes a problem. So they're cleaning it up, and, you know, they're annoyed that they have to clean up after Thor, but they're also mentioning, you know, the ladies of SHIELD are mentioning how good looking he is. But here is Phil Coulson referencing Sorcerer Mickey and having a magical broom to clean up. So anyway, they find out that something was stolen from a tree, and that the imprint reads Asgardian. So they end up going to a professor in Seville, Spain, who knows all about Asgardian things. And it turns out he is Asgardian. So anyway, they mentioned that there's a Mount Thor, but that has no relation to Asgard. But like I said, this professor knows everything about Asgardians because he was a soldier for the Asgards. Then we also have a reference to Hulk and his anger. And we have a reference to Tahiti, which is a project, not the real place Tahiti, but the project Tahiti. Episode 9, Repairs. So the ship is having issues, and they are looking at something going in between the worlds, right? And referencing Thor once again, going between the worlds. So with this and the last two pictures before, there was an incident at a laboratory, and the person that was closest to the incident is able to shift between the worlds. And everyone's blaming this woman, but she wasn't the reason to blame. But she's being targeted by this person who is able to go between the worlds. Here this will come back into play, but here we have Agent May and Agent Ward in the beginning of their schmexual relationships, and this will come back later. Then we have a reference to Hogwarts. Daisy was joking with Simmons that she never went to Hogwarts like they did, as a joke to the SHIELD schools. So, episode 10, The Bridge, they travel first to Havenworth Federal Penitentiary, because there's an incident, and Michael, who was seen in the first episode, is doing good, right? and he's asking if he beat Captain America's time because he's like working out and all that. They travel to the University of Ohio. Now, the person that they're dealing with is like all over the place, but as we see, they brought Michael on board for this mission, and Michael's referencing back to the first episode when his son was looking at the Avenger action toys from the New York incident in the movie Avengers. Lastly, for this incident, they're back in Oakland, California, to try to defeat the bad guy. I really should just map everything out. Anyway, episode 11, The Magical Place. Now, this is talking about Project Tahiti more so. And there's going to be more and more that comes up. So we have another piece of Chitauri, and they're selling, someone bad obviously is selling it to people. And here we have a reference to, I believe it was a baseball game. Here we have a mention of the lawyer Rothborn, and Daisy, who's kicked off the team for the moment, goes undercover pretending to be May, which she played really well, to get information. And this was done on purpose. Well, the team did this on purpose without even telling Daisy, but Daisy did her thing, so she kicked ass. So in this episode, they learn more about Project Tahiti, which was done on Coulson after the Avengers movie, right? He was injured. Well, he technically died. And according to this doctor, it was Fury himself who determined that they keep Coulson alive, this project. But during it, Coulson had to be awake, and he was screaming to let him die. We're going to find way more out about Project Tahiti and how this becomes important. And we have Michael back, but he's being experimented on by the centipede, and we now see a link to the person that controls the eye thing. This is again going to come back into play later on. Episode 12, Seeds. So at SHIELD school, there is a situation going on where people are being iced over. And so the team goes to the science division. This is where Simmons and Fitz went to school. You'll see that Ward shows Daisy the Wall of Valor. You may not notice, but Bucky Barnes is on here, as you see. And so during a talk with Simmons and Fitz, who is giving like this lecture, one of the students freezes over and they have to save him. Meanwhile, Melinda, May, and Agent Coulson are in Mexico City, and they are asking about an 804. 084. And it turns out that this little girl was saved, and it was Daisy. Meanwhile, this girl let on that Donnie and Seth were actually friends and working on something, which became the problem in the entire episode, and that they had planned to bring Agent Fitz and Simmons in to meet them, and they were actually working for this man. Anywho, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 1, Episode 13, Tracks. In this episode, they're going after that guy in the last episode who owns Cybertech. And here we have a cameo by Stan Lee, you know, the man who created Marvel. Anyway, they're talking about Asgard, meaning Thor, where Thor comes from. And Phil Coulson clearly does not want to deal with that again today. But they were dealing with a train situation, and he got knocked out and they are on their way to figure this out, but the train disappears for Phil Coulson and Grant Ward. Meanwhile, Michael was put into this chamber. They thought he had passed away, but the owner of Cybertech created Deathlock, which we'll see, and this was the leg, which he then forces Michael to use to do his bidding. The owner of Cybertech shoots Daisy, and the only way to save her currently is to put her into the same seal lock as Michael was, until they can find a solution. Episode 14, Tahiti. Now, the team is going to search for a cure for Daisy, but the only solution that they can come up with is going after Tahiti, which is what actually saved Phil Coulson after Avengers in New York. So they learn what it actually is, and they use that to actually save Daisy. But this also causes problems because Phil Coulson learns how he was, or it was the beginning of how he learned that he was saved, and it's the beginning to his spiral in this information. This also sets them up for the clairvoyant, which then sets them up for Hydra, which comes into the next episode. But again, in this episode, Phil Coulson finds out that not only the technique, but the blood that was used, the formula, was from an alien that saved him, and he did not want Daisy to deal with that. So he did try to stop them from giving it to her, but it did save her life. Episode 15, Yes Men. So in this episode, we have this girl who is from Asgard. She's able to use her powers to make men fall in love, like a, not a mermaid, a siren, right? Like a siren. And so a Valkyrie guardian comes down, and she comes to help. During this entire episode, they're not only chasing her, but they're finding out that Fury knew about an 804 and was hiding it. They also find out that somebody in their group, which ended up being Melinda May, knew about Tahiti and was keeping the tabs on Coulson to then tell Fury for a reason. They didn't want Coulson to spiral. So this siren, as we said, was going after any man that was deemed strong and using them, I mean. We also have Coulson trying to find Fury to find out answers about what happened and the techniques, because something feels off. We also have a mention of the two doctors, Dr. Selvig and Dr. Foster from Thor. Dr. Foster, Jane Foster, is the one that Thor falls in love with, and we do see her in the future MCU timeline. We also have a mention of Loki, which also comes throughout the MCU timeline. And this Guardian is someone we do meet as part of the Valkyries. Anyway, during this exchange, they are learning about the other realms. They are not the multiverses, just realms, and how Loki can go from place to place. And this is kind of how Lorelai worked. We did see a little bit of this in, I believe it was Thor Dark World. And we'll definitely see more of this, but there's also a mention of Kree and other Inhumans, or I guess they would be aliens to us, that we will encounter along the MCU. So in the next three pictures are Easter eggs. We see Britney Spears, and she at the time was headlining in Nevada, Las Vegas, and they went to the Caesar's Palace. So that is the end of episode 15 for the Easter egg. Episode 16, End of the Beginning. So they are in Sydney, Australia, and they are talking about the Index and the Clairvoyant, and the Index is run by S.H.I.E.L.D., and they really want to know what is happening. They know that Deathlok is under her control, or under their control. They don't know if the Clairvoyant is a man or a woman. But they do know that Michael is Deathlok, and he has the same issue that I can't remember her name in the beginning, had. We also meet Victoria Hand, who we'll see later on. She is high up in the S.H.I.E.L.D. agency. And then we also have the team splitting up between these three locations. And this is going to be important because they don't have enough members for each location. I apologize. I'm at 4 locations. They end up going to Pensacola, where Deathlok is. That is Michael. And they meet this person who they think is the Clairvoyant. Grant ends up killing this person, but it is not who they think it is. This person was actually just being used. Meanwhile, Director Fury is back at the Triskelion, and this is when Phil Coulson finds out that Melinda May was using an encrypted line on the plane to watch over him and report back to Fury. And the end of this episode, we have Victoria Hand telling other agents, aka Hydra, that they will be taking over Phil Coulson's plane. They're going to take over the team, and basically they want them gone. Episode 17, Turn, Turn, Turn. So this is when they're being taken over. Reaper is a different plane, and they're going to touch down. They're being taken over by, I believe it was Garrett's team. Meanwhile, yeah, it was Garrett. So meanwhile, they are dealing with Melinda and not trusting her because she had a direct line. They thought she was talking to the Clairvoyant when she was talking to Fury. At the same time, this encrypted message comes out of the light and out of the dark and into the light, Hydra. So this is when Phil's team learns that Hydra had infiltrated S.H.I.E.L.D. And it mentions back to Captain America and when S.H.I.E.L.D. was created to protect Captain America and then the Avengers. They also report that Director Fury is dead, but she's not. And they really need to figure out what Tahiti actually was. Now, there's also a mention of Avengers Age of Ultron coming up, where they know that Hydra has taken over and they really needed something. But here, right here, Captain America has defeated the helicarriers at the Triskelion. Back in the Age of Ultron, to protect them, they used the 3 helicarriers that were being used by the villains they destroyed them, right? It was Falcon specifically and Captain America in that movie, in that scene, I should say. But as you see in this ending, we have the Hydra symbol. Now, you may recognize it because of the MCU, but you may also recognize that it kind of looks like an octopus. And I did learn this fairly recently, that the octopus is actually a Nazi symbol for anti-Semitism. That was new to me, but it makes sense why the Hydra symbol looks the way it does. Episode 18, Providence. So in this episode, we have the girl in the flower dress, and we have Grant Ward going to speak with her. We also see that there have been attacks like on the UN. So we're kind of in the middle of mixing the Avengers and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. There's a lot of moving parts in this timeline, but a lot of things will make sense when you know what's happening. Now, there in Havana, Cuba, we have the girl in the flower dress with Garrett, Grant Ward, and we also have Simmons undercover. She knows what she's doing, but she is an undercover agent at this time. They are also mentioning Tom Brady, and that was kind of a signal that something was going on. They also mention the Black Widow, Natasha Romanoff, Candy Crush, which was very popular during this time when it was filmed. And they also mentioned Tahiti. They know what Tahiti is. They were all there, but they don't know the full scope of it. So they plan on finding out themselves. Meanwhile, Phil Coulson's badge lights up, and it's coordinates. And this is when Melinda May let Coulson know that Fury wasn't actually in charge of the Tahiti program, Phil Coulson was. And that's where it gets tricky. We also have a mention of Moby Dick. So here we have the fridge. We have seen the fridge slightly when they were talking about the slingshot and slinging alien objects into space and destroying it. But what actually happened was the slingshot's fake. What they do is they put all these weapons into storage so nobody can find it except for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., except now that it's fallen to the villains. Anyway, Phil Coulson and the team, minus Grant, follow the coordinates to a bunker out in like Serbia, and this is where they're safe, at least for now. Episode 19, The Only Light in the Darkness. So here we have a Easter egg to Call of Duty. Maria Hill is Fury's partner. Partner as in she's works under him. We also have that black goo that was seen earlier, and we'll see it again later in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but we also saw this in season 2 of Agent Carter. This is what destroyed it's basically the reason for why season 2 of Agent Carter even existed. So they're going to go through a human lie detector, and we're going to see that Romanoff was mentioned, Alexander Pierce. We have the TARDIS, aka Doctor Who, which is now on Disney+. Yay! We have his father, who was part of the original team with Captain America. The Dark Force, which you'll have to look up, and Project Insight. So there are some other projects besides Tahiti, but Tahiti was a big thing of what they went after. We also have mention of the NSA, and Daisy mentions Steve Rogers, aka Captain America. We also have mention of Bruce Banner, aka the Hulk, and we have another mention of Maria Hill and her connection with Melinda May. Episode 20, Nothing Personal. So they're back in Washington, D.C., at least for now, and Pepper is contacted by Maria Hill, who is then contacted by Melinda May. And they're asking about Stark and Alexander Pierce. Again, these names will come back up, and it is important. We also see that Simmons has found Daisy's warning that Ward is part of Hydra, and Daisy's trying to lead him away from the team to protect them. Now, if you know Director Fury, he has faked his death, but so has Phil Coulson, and Phil Coulson technically died, right? Which is why Tahiti existed. Well, in this, they hide important information, and Phil Coulson goes to, well, Melinda May goes to collect that information for him to protect him. Word catches on that Daisy actually knows, but he's still trying to hide that he's not a Nazi, but she calls him straight out, like she knows. Phil Coulson also remembers that certain people think he's dead, and this is when they learn that it was Phil Coulson who was actually the leader of the Tahiti Project, and he was using a very controversial technique to bring back an Avenger, and they ended up using it on him. It gets more complicated than that, so we're going to keep digging. Episode 21, Ragtag. So now the team is partly in the juvenile, or this is a screenshot back to the juvenile center. And this is when Ward met Garrett, and Garrett took him in and basically trained him. Now this is important because this is why Grant Ward was so loyal to Garrett, and his history of who he is, and how he ended up at juvie. Meanwhile, the team is in DC, and they want to infiltrate Cybertech. So here we have the leader of Cybertech mentioning Bin Laden, of the, Afghan-Iraq war. We have Trojan horse mentioned from Greek, I don't know if you would call it Greek history. And of course, we have the original stuff that was used in Captain America, the First Avenger, with the team. So meanwhile, they're trying to infiltrate Cybertech, and Raina's looking at this slide. So first of all, I want to mention that there are several hidden Mickeys in the slide. We also have mention of Deathlock, which Garrett was the first one. And Simmons learns that he wanted to be a boy again, right? Like, so this is a Easter egg to Pinocchio. Anyway, back in Havana again, Raina is talking with, I forgot who she was talking to. Anyway, she was mentioning Baby's parents being monsters. She was talking about Daisy's family, Daisy's parents being monsters. And we're going to learn a lot more about Daisy and her family very soon. And lastly, we have episode 22, beginning of the end. So we have Ward wanting, or talking with Raina about doing a coup and getting rid of Garrett, knowing that he's going to do something harmful. He's also talking about Skye and how Skye is a huge problem. Skye knows. Skye already knows. Anyway, Fury comes to the rescue. We have Garrett mentioning the Ice Queen, also known as Elsa. We have Ace again, who's Michael's son, and we have Daisy here giving him a Hulk action figure. Now, while the team thought they killed Garrett, he became even stronger with a new Deathlock suit, which, that's scary. We also see a picture of Daisy as an adult, and this man who is carving things. This symbol is going to come into play. Tune in for more information because there are some big hints with that. Okay, guys, thanks for stopping by. That is the end of season 1. I know it was a super long video. If you guys could do me the favor of liking, subscribing, sharing, commenting, and hit that bell button so you will be notified every time we upload. Again, there's gonna be way more content, more Easter eggs, more fun things. I have a lot planned and I'm super excited. And I hope to see you guys next time, aka later, for Echo.